Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Forum. So glad you're here. We're here on part 2 in this fascinating conversation with Colm Holland, the author of The Secret of the Alchemist. We just had an amazing dialogue last week about alchemy and the black phase and the white phase and the red phase, and introducing unconditional love as being the essence under all that is. And today we're going to continue our dialogue, and we're going to be focusing on going deeper into everything that the Alchemist and the Secret of the Alchemist has to say about unconditional love and the nature of the universe. So Colm, I found it interesting, first off, when I was reading your book, that you use the word capital L, love, for what someone else might call God. And I know as a minister and on my podcast, I'm constantly translating that word God because it's a real trigger for some people. And so I'll say like God, the great mystery, source energy, divine love, whatever name you want to use for it. But I'm really interested is that like something that you intended from the beginning, and do you find those words interchangeable, or why did you select that word?
Okay, it's really interesting. This is synchronicity. I am, as I mentioned in the first episode, I'm writing a course on what I call alchemy transformation. So it's my understanding of how alchemy can contribute to our understanding of personal transformation. And I actually address exactly the question in one of my opening videos for one of the modules in the course. And I'll just quote you a few lines from it. So I say this, that quite often when people read my book and they see that I speak of unconditional love with a capital L as if it's an independent entity, they ask me what you asked is, oh, didn't you use the word love instead of Buddha or Krishna or Allah or Yahweh or the divine or Shiva or God or Jehovah or spirit or higher self or Mother Earth, or I looked it up. There's about 100 plus names, and that's not even counting all the Hindu gods. So, they've got thousands just themselves. So, so what I say is this: that I'm conscious that we actually all bring our own meaning and understanding to the word love. So I just want to talk about love as an entity, because we are conscious of romantic love, parental love. I'm trying to think of all compassionate love in the sense of charity and so on and so on. So particularly in English, we've got a problem that we use the word love. I love candy in one phrase, and I love you forever in the same phrase. It's the same word, The Greeks didn't have that problem. They, and lots of other cultures have different words for love to mean different things. And they have a word for unconditional love, which is the closest I think we get to it is in Old English is charity. As St. Paul says in his letter to the Corinthians, if I give my body away to be burned, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, if I do all these amazing things, but I have not charity, in the King James Version, I think that's pretty close, because charity is the giving of oneself unconditionally for the benefit of another. And so I believe that the universe is imbued with a force, as I mentioned in the earlier episode, that can be described as unconditional love. And just in case there's any confusion, then there's nothing wrong, in my opinion. I'm not judging. In fact, I have no real judgment of this at all. It doesn't really figure in my thought that one person may think of love as God, others may think of love as Allah, others may think of love as Krishna. That's all fine. It's all, whatever works for an individual is relevant. But for me, there is a litmus test for that deity. And that is that the deity that we lean on must represent love in a particular way if it's to match what the alchemists thought of as this force of love in the universe. So this is my understanding. And those of you who know St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians will see I borrowed a bit here, so I'm confessing that now. So this is a love that cares beyond measure. It never gives up, especially on us. It constantly wants the best for another. It forgives and never judges. It is full of compassion and mercy and feels the pain and joy of others deeply. But here's the key. It is a love revealed through action. So this is my definition of love, and it has no bounds, and it is unchanging. So whatever deity we use in our mind to represent, in our faith, whatever our faith practice believes, as long as that's the image of love that we have, then I believe we're talking about the same thing, for sure. So in answer to your question is, am I referring to a particular deity? Then the answer is, well, mostly no. Mostly no.
If your concept of that deity is this, then yes, but if not, no. Yeah. And it's a beautiful, I don't know if definition is the right word for all those characteristics that you, and anytime we try to name it, anytime we try to name something, we miss it. But that's a great set of words and kind of energetic words that go around into the capital L love that you're talking about.
If I could just clarify one other bit, and I don't talk about this in my book, but I do want to mention it here. So sometimes in some faith traditions, and I've come across them, it's really confusing when that same deity has another side to its character. Mm-hmm. And that's when I part company, and I'm not judging it, but I can't subscribe to it. And it's when love has to be non-exclusive, and it has to be non-judgmental to be unconditional love, in my opinion. So it's important that whatever deity we acknowledge, if we're really to benefit from the power of that love, then it must be non-exclusive and non-judgmental. So I say here in my course that a notion of love that is metering out tests or punishments or trials or deliberately painful lessons or agonizing grief as some kind of disciplinary measures that we're meant to endure, and some, or even a love that just simply withdraws protection from these things, that's not the love I believe in.
Or has preferences.
Preferences.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Exclusivity to one group or another. So that is where I often part company with people who try and ascribe a deity and say, well, this deity embodies love. So
yes, yeah, I completely agree. I often use the word indiscriminate. Like it is not just boundless, but it also says, there's also scripture about the rain falls on the righteous and the unrighteous. It's the righteous and the unrighteous is our judgment, and the rain is indiscriminate. It doesn't care. It's there to provide for all, completely and wholly. And to me, I agree. That is to me what God is as love. But I do get it. That's why there's so many triggers with these words, because there's all sorts of other in the Bible when God tells Moses to go kill these people and get that tribe, and it's like, whoa, what is that? That's not the same God we're talking about. But for me, a lot of that's allegory, but I love your, it's just so beautiful. Can you say that again? All of those, cares beyond measure and...
Sure. Hold on, I'll just pull it up here again. So this is quoting from my book. A love that cares beyond measure, never gives up, constantly wants the best for another, forgives and never judges, is full of compassion and mercy, feels the pain and joy of others deeply. a love revealed through action. This is my definition of love, and it has no bounds and is unchanging.
So beautiful. Yeah.
Here's the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
If we commit to personal transformation, and the goal, as I say repeatedly in my book, the goal of transformation is to reach an end point, and that end point is what I call true empowerment. If you want to know what true power looks like, and there's a lot of fighting for power going on in our world and our societies right now, if you want to know what true empowerment looks like, it looks like that. It looks like unconditional love. So when am I at my most powerful? When I'm loving others unconditionally. When am I at my most powerful? It's when I feel the pain and joy of others and can enter into it with them. When am I at my most powerful? It's when I'm full of compassion and mercy for another, when I don't judge them, when I step into that other man's shoes or that other woman's shoes. That's when I'm living out of a place of unconditional love. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the treasure that Santiago, when he goes on his journey to the pyramids, in the end of the day, it's that love that he discovers. It's represented through the romantic love of Fatima. But when you get to the very end of the book, and some of the last words of the book, in fact, I'll quote it for you. And those of you who know Song of Solomon in the Old Testament will recognize some resonances here. So at the very end, when Santiago has finally found his treasure, I'm quoting here now from the Alchemist, it says this, that the wind began to blow again. It was the Levanta, the wind that came from Africa, and it didn't bring with it the smell of the desert, nor the threat of Moorish invasion. Instead, it brought the scent of a perfume that he knew well, and the touch of a kiss that came from far away, slowly, slowly, until it rested on his lips. The boy smiled. It was the first time she had done that. "I'm coming, Fatima," he said. And that's the end of the story of the Alchemist. That's the last paragraph in the book. So what if the whole story is a metaphor, if it's a fable, it's that he has discovered that unconditional love isn't just a nice thought. It isn't just an idea. It is a sensation. And if we've gone through our entire life and we've never known the sensation as well as the idea of unconditional love, then that's a good reason to begin transforming right there. If you're searching for gold in your life, and that gold is it's illusory, it's eluding you in many ways, then maybe think about, have I ever allowed love to really embrace me in I'm not saying a sensual way or a romantic way, because that's not really what this fable is about, but it's a discovery that there's an intimacy with love. And if we've not known the intimacy of love, of being desired by love just for who we are, there's nothing we can do. I don't have to be this person to be loved, or I don't have to improve myself to become that person to be loved. But to discover that the force that lives within the universe actually desires us. And that's what the Alchemist story, that's who Fatima represents. And can you separate it from the sensation of falling in love with another human being? I mean, Paolo is kind of saying no, actually, and why should you? Why do we need to compartmentalize love and describe it this way or this way or this way or this way? Love is love, and it manifests itself in so many, multifarious ways. And so why not use the concept of romantic love? And many people, biblical scholars interpret that book in the Old Testament, the Song of Solomon, in that way.
A love story, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it both ways. I mean, I've heard people say, "Oh, no, this is about sexual romantic love," and then I've heard them say, "No, it's a spiritual thing." Well, guess what? It's both.
Yeah, and Rumi's writings are so much about love.
Rumi,
yeah.
absolutely. That's a whole nother episode.
Well, was it? So it was a while ago that I read Robert Johnson's books, He, She, and We. But I think, wasn't it in his book, didn't he say that like we're not really wired to contain romantic love we can't sustain it for long periods of time. So he talked about the stir the oatmeal love with another, that we move to a place where it's a different kind of love because it's almost like having too much electrical energy at once.
Yes, absolutely. If you want to understand romantic love from a Jungian perspective, then Robert Johnson is the best guy to read, in my opinion. He only passed away recently, by the way, as well.
I didn't know
he was
that,
in his late 90s. It was an amazing life.
They're little tiny books and they're amazing. They're just packed full of so much cool stuff. And he uses mythology to explain, the feminine and the masculine and then romantic love.
Yes, I mean, he and Joseph Campbell were on the same page, really. It's impossible to actually interpret Jung without talking about mythology, really, in my opinion. But yes, so romantic love is a sensation, and it can't be sustained permanently, but it can be alluded to frequently. That's how I like to think of it. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've been married to my wife for 48 years. We've only got 2 years to go. We're going to have our 50th wedding anniversary, and I must confess that I still look at her and I still get a tingle.
Oh.
Because I see, what am I seeing in that? And I think this is the lesson about romantic love. Romantic love is not something that we necessarily have to grow out of. It needs to mature. And our relationship to the love of the universe, the grace that lives within the universe, is the same thing. At the age of 18, I had a very, very sensational experience of love, to the point that people thought I was crazy. I was in university at the time, and I was going around telling everybody they should all love one another. And I think many of them thought I was on a particular really good quality weed at the time, but I wasn't. I was drunk with love.
They wanted some of that.
Yeah, they wanted some of that, but they got really disappointed when I told them what it was. And many people have had Kundalini moments of that encounter with love in the universe, and in those times, you can perform miracles. I mean, people do physical healing miracles and others, and lots of shamans and holy men try and spend their lives trying to stay in that moment so that they can impart this to others, and it's not easy. And I don't know if it's really meant either. Whether that is the state we're meant to be. But going back to romantic love and Robert Johnson, yes, that romantic love needs to not be extinguished, not to be despised as something that is a lesser love. It's still important part of love, but it needs to mature. Yeah, for sure. It needs to learn to accept the faults and the failings of ourselves. One of the things I was listening, do you remember a pop star called Cat Stevens?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Those of you who are around, well, he's back and he's doing some new music. And of course, he converted to Islam. Sufism actually is what he converted to. And I was listening to a radio interview with him that happened on Sunday, and I jotted down some of the things that he said. And one of the most really thing that stood out to me is that we need to learn to fall in love with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the starting point of being able to love others. But he didn't say, "Oh, we need to learn to love ourselves ideologically." He actually said we need to learn to fall in love with ourselves.
Fall in love with ourselves, yeah.
I hadn't quite. The falling in love bit was the bit that stood out to me, and because that's quite a romantic notion.
It is, yeah.
And many narcissists would say, "Well, yes, of course, I am the most wonderful person in the world, anyway." But that's not what he means, of course.
No. Yeah, I think everything does start with self-love. And I work with a lot of people, and I was so fortunate. I had great parents. I really was fortunate. I'm not saying that they completely 100% got who I was. They did not get who I was at my depth. But in terms of having an example of a loving couple before me and seeing that, I think it set me so far forward in my ability to love myself. And others have all sorts of other experiences, as you explained yours in our last episode, being in the cupboard underneath the stairs and whatnot.
The original Harry Potter.
I was thinking the same thing when I was reading about that. Not only is the Philosopher's Stone in your book, but the cupboard is too. Yeah. So, but no matter what, this alchemy is a process for everyone. No matter what. Do you think, like, no matter what, no matter how difficult your upbringing was, no matter how much abuse you experienced or anything like that?
There is the human psyche is a very, very fragile thing. And yes, of course, there are times when abuse can be so horrific that, to use a modern psychological term, I mean, there is splitting off can occur because reality is too bad. Reality was too painful, and so people live in a psychotic state of unreality, and then there are medical conditions of schizophrenia and chronic depression and bipolar and so on and so on. I'm not denying any of those things at all, but I think even within those states, and I've got several friends who are psychiatrists who really have told me they really appreciate my book, because they say that even in those worst states, there is an element of transformation that is possible. I said in the first episode that alchemy believes that you can be fixed. Sometimes the damage is so bad that fixing to a state of what we would call normal operation is really hard for some people, and I acknowledge that, and I'm not denying that at all. But even amongst people who suffer in that way, I have seen improvements at the hands of really good, well-trained psychiatrists, and sometimes with the help of drugs as well, where there are chemical issues involved. It is possible. And here's the thing: in my mind, do I differentiate between modern scientific and medical advancement and the metaphysical? Are they exclusively separate from each other, or can they help each other? And of course, the alchemists, as I explain in my book, were actually the first scientists. They were the first chemists. they were the ones, not a lot of people know this, but Sir Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, was an alchemist. He was a devoted alchemist. He believed that all things could transform. There was a transmutation possible for all matter, material and immaterial. And if you look at the history of alchemy, and there's a bit of it in my book, you'll see that some of the greatest early discoveries about germs and the ability to anesthetize, the ability to have anesthetic, to have the ability to keep a clean environment, to stop germs from spreading. Most of these guys who discovered all that were alchemists. And so the birth of modern medicine and the birth of modern chemistry as we know it, and even the birth of quantum physics, that's a whole other story, can be attributed back not necessarily to an alchemist, but certainly to the concepts that the alchemists believed in. So yeah,
So the alchemists, to go back to that, it's like the alchemists are known for this transmutation process of turning lead or something very base into gold, which happens in reality, but it also happens in our own selves, the transformation of ourselves. And you point out in your book that the alchemists have to go through their own transformation. Like it's not something they can just kind of observe, and it's kind of a dance, right, of the elements and also their own personal transformation. Is that right?
Yes. Did they ever turn lead into gold physically?
Maybe. Does it matter?
Again, if you've managed to do that and it's on Amazon, send me the link and I'll buy it tomorrow.
Maybe they did get a little bit.
Yeah, well, they definitely at the collider at CERN in Switzerland, the Hadron Collider, they for a millisecond they claimed to have turned a lead ion into a gold ion.
Yeah, there you go.
Is it possible for things to transmute? Yes. Is it commercially viable? No.
at least as far as we know in this.
Not in our lifetime. I don't.
This world that we live in. Yeah.
But that misses the point, does it not? In the sense that all of this is about a greater treasure beyond the physical, but it includes the physical as well, for sure.
In The Alchemist, they talk a lot about the heart and learning to listen to your heart. Are you equating that also with unconditional love?
Yes. The heart is a symbol, by the way, and I believe it's a symbol for it's the positive side of our unconscious. That's what in Jungian terms, I believe that.
The heart is a positive side of our unconscious.
It's the positive manifestation of our unconscious, if you want to think of it in Jungian terms, which we alluded to quite a bit in the first episode. So the heart possesses a knowledge, according to the story of the alchemist. The heart already knows everything there is to know about transformation. The heart already knows everything there is to know about love. And that's the recurring theme through the story of Santiago. So what Santiago is encouraged by Melchizedek, and what he learns for himself in the crystal shop in his conversations with the merchant, who is actually representative of the doubting negative part of the unconscious. So what Santiago's doing in the crystal shop, in that purification, as he's cleaning the glass crystal in the shop, what he's doing is he's in the unconscious and he's sorting out what is useful and what is not useful. What in his unconscious can he learn from, and what should he learn to ignore? And that's a really, really important transformational moment in all of our lives, because how many of us wake up in those early hours of the morning, and suddenly we have all these voices that are full of really unuseful, unhelpful, negative stories to tell us about ourselves, about our life, about our relationships, or whatever. And if you don't transform, if you don't commit to transformation, they can easily become the dominant voices in our life. And we don't even need anybody else to be negative. We don't need anybody else to be.
We've got our own.
Yeah, we've got more than enough to. So there's a chapter in my book called "There Will Be Blood."
Yes, I remember that.
And that is the beginning of the red phase. We talked about the black and the white in the first episode. So we're talking about the red phase. So one of the things after we've gone through the white phase, where we've actually learned to differentiate between the positive and the negative in our unconscious, what are the helpful thoughts and what are the unhelpful thoughts? One of the things that we have to be pretty disciplined in, and it is a discipline and it does work, in my experience, is that when negative thoughts rise up from the unconscious that would destroy the power that we've discovered, then you just have to kill them. There's no arguing with them. No reasoning will work. They literally just need to be destroyed, period. They need to be given no voice. They need to be given no place. They need to be given no authority. They need to be, put to death, and there will be blood. That's the reason for that title of that phrase. And that can take several years, but with all good things, with patience and practice, you will find, I found, immense relief, an immense whole new space in my thought life for more positivity than I ever dreamt, because it was so full of those negative thoughts that wanted to hold me back, that wanted to fill me with doubt about my own ability and my own capability in life. And so, yes, that is part of the process. And it's alluded to in the story of the Alchemist, when Santiago first arrives in North Africa and he goes through that moment of darkness where he loses everything and even his own identity. One of the things that he sees, and this is Paolo just planting a little seed in the marketplace on display in a shop, is the most beautiful sword that he's ever seen. Of course, the sword is an alchemy symbol, and it is the sword of purification. And the sword of purification is something we have to grasp ourselves, and it is very sharp. And it is like a surgeon's knife, if you like, to just cut away those things that are not useful, that are not helpful, that don't contribute to our well-being. And we have to be brutal sometimes.
Yeah, so not just like a thanks for sharing, go take a seat. It's like, you do not belong here.
Yes. You can only really differentiate. So people often get very nervous at that. But what if it's my inner child? What if it's the part of my heart I haven't listened to? What if it's this? What if it's that? Well, the way you will know is that the inner child, the voice of the inner child, wants to be healed. It isn't just going to complain. It isn't just going to whinge and moan and say, you haven't ever given me a voice. I've been wounded, I'm in pain, I'm so on. That's what so it will cry out for love. It will never say to you, you're no good.
Yeah, you're not worthy.
You're not worthy.
You can't do it. Yeah.
That's how you will know the difference. It will say, I want to be loved. I want to be whole. I want to know well-being. Can you help me assimilate the love that I need to reach that point? That is a very different voice to one that says, you're a failure. You'll never amount to anything. Give up now. Why bother? etc., etc. Those are the thoughts you've got to look out for, and those are the ones that are going to be met by the sword.
Are those thoughts, do you think those are kind of universal in the collective unconscious? Or are they specific to people and their experience growing up? The I'm not worthy, and it does seem like we universally have those.
Okay, we've touched on a new topic.
Okay, we can pivot back.
No, I'm happy to touch on it, which is the collective unconscious.
Okay, we'll touch on it and we'll come back to love.
Because I think it's linked. So one of the places that love exists is in the collective unconscious. I don't know how much your readers are familiar with Jung's teaching on archetypes. They are quite specific, and they're not necessarily what we think of when we think of archetypes, actually. So there is a pop view understanding of archetypes. That is, that in all of us is the witch entity, or is the hero entity, or the magician entity, or the multiple ones that you see on people's websites when they're trying to explain these are, and that we're just all playing out one of these entities. Jung never said that. That was not what Jung meant by archetypes. So I'm terribly sorry people have built careers on that. Most of them, refer to Jung a bit, but then go off on those entities, and that's not how he saw things. So for Jung, there is inherited imprints, if you like, in our unconscious that have power. And some of those are from nurturing, and some of them are from nature. The bits that from nature that are negative are inherited, but generally speaking, they're not because we're human. They've been inherited through our ancestry, our tribal framework that we've come down through. I've got a quote here from my book, which I'll just read, which kind of explains this in a way that I think it can be helpful. 1 second, here we go. So I describe an archetype. Here we go. Where have I got it? Sorry, I should have had it ready here.
That's okay. You didn't know we're going to go into the collective unconscious.
Yeah, I didn't know we were going to go. So it says, I'm saying this, that I like to think of archetypes as a coin. And an archetypes are the head of the monarch imprinted on our psyche, in the sense of the way a monarch, it's what rules our unconscious until we take control of our own psyche. That is what an archetype is. It reminds us to whom we have allegiance.
Okay.
That's one of the things an archetype is. And those archetypes become the currency, to take the coin metaphor to its, by which we communicate with each other. And that can be negative, that can be positive, but ultimately, unless we face our collective unconscious and understand its role in our own unconscious, we'll never truly be free to enter into true empowerment in our own life. So when I'm loving unconditionally, if I'm communicating that to you, ultimately I am communicating that to you through the collective unconscious. If I turn you into an enemy, I make you an enemy. There are no such things as enemies, by the way, only the ones we invent. That's a whole other story in itself. Then I am doing that through the collective unconscious, and somewhere I've inherited that way of seeing things. So it is a way of seeing things. It is a governing way of seeing things that controls the way we see things unless we take charge of it. and deal with it. And the only way to deal with it and take charge of it is through personal transformation. So within the collective unconscious, in the Alchemist, it's called the soul of the world. We have a choice. We can either contribute to the nurturing of the soul of the world through positivity, or we can diminish the soul of the world through the collective unconscious, through our negativity. And we have the choice to decide which of those two things we're going to contribute to the soul of the world, which is the collective unconscious. So something you said, Carol, which I just want to pick up on, about the state of the union of our societies right now. Do I think we're in a worse state or a better state now than we ever have been? Personally, I actually don't think things have changed very much at all. What has changed through social media is our awareness of how widespread it is. But my parents lived through the Second World War. My grandparents lived through the First World War, and it was pretty horrific. It was, I don't think we've seen, in my lifetime, I haven't seen anything like my grandfather's.
Yeah, our grandparents went through World War I, and then like the Spanish flu, and then the Depression. They went through so much. It's unbelievable what that generation went through.
And poverty, immense poverty,
yes.
which they had to dig themselves out of. In my family's case, I do talk a bit about my family background in that regard. And that experience does shape the way that we now see the world. But in terms of society and what we're going through, I am a historian by profession originally, so I do always tend to see things, in a historical context. Are they any worse or any better than they ever have been? No, I think they're very, very similar. When you think about what happened in Russia, for example, during the Second World War, when the Nazis invaded Russia, and the horrendous lives that people had to go through during that period of time on both sides, I'm not facing anything as terrible with the loss of everything.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, social media, everyone's, seeing whatever they're seeing right in front of us, and the media is directing us to all of this fear, and it's completely, you're right, it's completely different. At the same time, the awareness could be good in that there may be awakening going on for us to kind of return to love, or seeing more than maybe we saw before, and being motivated to change ourselves.
Yes, I would like to think so. I know lots of people are interpreting it's a way of drawing a positive outcome from what we're going through with the pandemic and the state of some of our political affairs. I'm not going to comment on that, but yes, it is a positive takeaway. But I actually believe that that's been true down through the whole history of humankind. I think in every generation there is that opportunity to become aware of the need for transformation, and that's what's driven society to achieve and to better our circumstances continuously. If you went back to 16th century and the invention of the print press, you'd say this is an amazing revolution. Now
right.
there is a new awareness
in
the world, because we've got these pamphlets now. We've got the written word in our own language, and we can learn to read it, and we can learn to be aware. So yes, I think it's cyclical. It's just that there's never been as many people as there are right now. I mean, the population of the earth has never been so great. It's the biggest it's ever been. There are more people alive today than there have been in history. So, not many people realize that there are more people on earth now
that have ever been,
than if you add up all the people who have ever lived. There are more alive now than historically have ever even been alive. So that in itself, yes, I will acknowledge that that is a phenomena in its own right, and it is having an impact on how we see ourselves and we see our world right now, for better or for worse. And it is an opportunity to transform. One of the challenges, I think, when you realize the size of the population, is it possible to still believe that me personally, the universe still cares about me personally when there's so many of us? That's a big challenge. And that's the root of nihilism. Those of you who study philosophy, that is one of the issues that the nihilists, have to face is, do I even matter? Am I personally of any consequence? And the answer is yes, absolutely, unequivocally, yes, because each of us, if we know that we are loved and we are willing to transform so that we can love in return, that is what changes the world. That is what will progress. So while we all care about the situation in the societies in which we live, in the end of the day, we are the components of that society.
Yeah, and you say in your book, you say humans are the secret ingredient in all the world because they bring love through action to enrich creation.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know who said that. Did I say that?
You said that.
Wow. Okay. Yes, I must quote that more often.
You said that. Yeah, I picked that out of your book last night. Humans are the secret ingredient in all the world because they bring love through action to enrich creation.
Yes.
Yes. So what would you tell people about bringing love through action to enrich creation? What would you? I mean, what would be?
It is a state of mind first. It is a state of heart first. It is a state of the soul first before action can take place. But it is impossible when the heart and the soul and the psyche is transformed not to be involved in action. It is an irresistible consequence of transformation. And it's where I begin my book with the whole definition of true empowerment. And I summarized it in our first episode really succinctly, in as much as if you want to know what true empowerment looks like, then go and see what unconditional love looks like. When I'm manipulating people so I can have control of them, is that true empowerment? No, of course not. When I force other people to my point of view, or I condemn them for not sharing my point of view, is that true empowerment? No, of course it's not. Any intelligent person can see through that if they're prepared to examine themselves. When I judge you because you don't agree with me, is that true empowerment? No, of course. If I judge you because you're different from me in any way, is that true empowerment? No, of course not. True empowerment lives in appreciating the other as you appreciate yourself. So Jesus, when he said, there is only one commandment that I give you, and your Unity Church, we're going to love this one. They go, oh, Colm, he is one of us. There's only one commandment, and that's, love one another.
Love one another. Love one another.
Anybody, hands up, anybody who doesn't understand what that means, just, I'll explain it to you. It means, love one another. Do you want a further explanation? Well, yeah, I'll give it to you. It means love one another. Anybody miss that? Anybody didn't get that message?
Well, I think the challenge is people put these artificial boundaries around who the one another is. Like love one another who are like me, or love one another. Of course, I'm also, everybody who's in my community knows this. I'm also a teacher of loving all beings, not just stopping at the human-animal interface. And so love one another. What would that be if we start including everyone in it, not just my tribe, my family, my tribe, my nation, my world, my species. Love every being. So.
But right there, Carol, out of your own lips has come the wisdom of the alchemist, which is what makes us unique as a species is we are, as you quoted earlier, we are the conduit. One of the things that, so where do I derive my theory that we are unique in this regard? And it goes back to The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Towards the end of the book, in order to become an alchemist, Santiago has to turn himself into the wind. Oh, the wind, right. So that's now an entity, is it? We thought the wind was just high pressure and low pressure moving about the face of the earth, and it's the differential between the high. Sorry for the geography lesson, everyone. I used to teach geography once upon a time. So the differential between high pressure and low pressure and the isobars. So where there's a higher pressure or a lower pressure, the wind, the power of the wind is created between the differential of the two and how close they are to each other. Is that an entity? Not in the world of academia, no, it's not. But in the world of alchemy, yes, it is. And are we connected to that in some way? Yes, we are. So how can Santiago turn himself into the wind? Well, he ends up having an argument with the wind and with the desert and ultimately with the sun. And guess what they're arguing about? It's what is love. And a lot of maybe people of a pagan philosophy persuasion might disagree with me, which is fine. What the alchemist teaches that whilst the wind and the desert and the sun and all the parts of the elements of the element and the earth itself, whilst it has an appreciation in some regard to love, it doesn't actually know love in the way that humans can know love. And the alchemist, that Santiago becomes the alchemist when he discovers one really core essential truth when he's communing with the sun. Because one of the things the sun ultimately says to him, so what is this love then? What do you mean I don't know what love is? And he says, look, this is beyond me. You need to go and speak to the hand that wrote all. So Santiago then communes with what in alchemy terms is prima materia, the essence of all of life. Call it God, Spirit, all those wonderful names. That's who he communes with. And what he discovers is that the soul of the universe exists within his own soul. And that he, a human, can perform miracles, can manifest magic. And this is where I usually lose most of the people that have been sympathetic towards my views at this point. Do I believe in magic? Yes. Do I believe in miracles? Yes. Am I ashamed of believing in those things? Absolutely not. Do I believe that we can perform miracles, that we can perform magic, that we can change the world around us through that medium? Yes, absolutely. And if you and I identify with those of you who don't believe that, who think that's going too far. Colm, you've left us now. You've gone, you've gone one step too far. Well, go back and read The Alchemist. Mm-hmm. Because that's exactly what this book is all about.
Yeah, I mean, it says, I have this quote right here, and Santiago is told by the alchemist to listen to his heart because it knows all things. And when he does, that is when miracles happen. So what is a miracle to you?
A miracle is when the well-being of somebody is transformed to being a greater level of well-being. It's, for me, a miracle is a shift from one level of well-being to a higher level of well-being.
So transformation itself.
It's a transformation in itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this something that just happens by itself? Sometimes, yes. Can we participate in that transformation within ourselves and even on behalf of others? Yes. That is ultimately the belief of the alchemists, is that why do the great work? Why go through the dark night of the soul? Why spend all of that time and energy in the white phase and the purification and the healing and the getting rid of the pain and dealing with the pain and making it your greatest treasure? And by the way, I want to just, before we part today, I want to talk a little bit about vulnerability and pain and woundedness.
Okay.
Because we've kind of brushed over that a bit. But why bother? Why go through all of this? Is it just because of some trip that we want to be on? As far as the alchemists are concerned, not at all. They were focused completely on creating this one thing, this philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone, just a slither, according to the fables, can heal, can transform, can take things from one level to another in terms of reality. And so that's why the alchemists did the great work. It was for a reason. It wasn't just for its own sake. And that can be part of our life. That can be our new reality. We can do that. Now, one of the things I just want to mention, Carol, before we have to finish, really, is that one of the great lessons I've learned from alchemy and the principles of alchemy is that it's full of paradox. In order to be this, you have to do this. And it's usually the opposite of what you think it is. So to be truly powerful, what do you need to be?
Vulnerable.
Truly vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
In order to become a healer, what do you need to be? You need to be the wounded healer. Oh, you mean, I thought I had to be completely healed and no, actually, by living in the vulnerability and acknowledging the wounds and allowing love to enter into that space, that vacuum that's created by the wounds, and letting love fill that space, that's when we can heal others. I mean, I did not write my book because I've arrived, or I know it all, or I'm this now incredible person who has no issues and no problems. I live with my wounds every day. I value my wounds. I love my wounds. I treasure my wounds because I've allowed love into those wounds, and love has enabled me to turn those wounds into my greatest treasure. So my power is that I am a wounded person. We are.
It's beautiful, yeah.
That is what we are, and that is the paradox of alchemy. So our greatest treasure is almost equivalent to our greatest wound if we've transformed and allowed love into those places. So for those people listening who are trying to run away from the wounds in their life, you are running away from your greatest treasure. For those of you who are seeking solution in substances or relationships that are not helpful, or workaholics, or whatever
addictions,
whatever drug,
yeah,
material and immaterial that you seek, if that's part of a running away from a wound, then the actual power and treasure that you seek in those things is actually back there, where the wound happened, where that went back. And all when we make the commitment, this is one of my favorite quotes, Carol, I'm going to quote it if you don't, from the Alchemist, is that when we commit to transformation, when we commit to pursuing our dream to find our true treasure, the whole universe conspires to make that happen. If I remember Paulo Coelho for just saying one thing, if I go to my grave remembering the one thing that helped transform my life. It's that quote.
It's so interesting. I remember I used to have, we made little bumper stickers and whatnot when I first started this church. We're not a church anymore, but I used to, I think it was on the back of our t-shirts, the universe is conspiring for your good. Yeah. Yeah. So I do want to close with really encouraging people to get your book and to read The Alchemist and get your book. And do you do this transformative work, this alchemical work with individuals as well?
Yes. So since the book came out, I have been approached by several people who have read that, particularly that portion in the back of the book where I say I do perform alchemy magic. So yes, if people want to contact me, alchemy magic is the sum of all the things that we've discussed in this, but it is, to give it some kind of shape, it is exactly what I discovered that Paulo Coelho did for me. I have worked really hard over the last 20 years to perfect the art of that. And it is specifically, I've found, of use to people who are on the journey, have probably progressed a long way down the journey, but you are usually at that oasis point that we described in the first episode. So if people want to go back and listen to what the oasis point is, but it's at that point where you think you've arrived, but your heart says maybe you haven't quite arrived. That is where the alchemist has a role to play. And an alchemist is somebody who can help invoke what you already know, the power you already own, to shift parts of the psyche that other things can't reach. So I specialize with people who say, I've tried everything. Usually I've tried this psychic, I've tried this medium, I've tried this therapy, I've tried that therapy, I've been meditating for 20 years, I've been doing mindfulness for 5 years, I've been to this seminar and I've enrolled in this course, but I just know, Colm, there's this one thing that none of these things seem to touch. And what we find, and if they make a commitment and they believe that that is what I can help them with, then 100% success rate. The universe and love is able to go into the parts of the psyche that it defies logic and reason, but does the job and enables people to move on. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, that's so great. I just feel so full from our conversations, and I'm so glad that, I get requests all the time to be on the podcast, and I usually just kind of toss them aside because I'm really looking for people who have an experience to share, not just a modality to apply. Yeah. And so that's why I really dug into the book. Love it. Really appreciate you. And thank you for bringing all of your wisdom to the Spiritual Forum podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol. And I do want to call you out, if I may.
Please do.
There needs to be a shout out here for Carol. All blessing to you for your amazing journey of your life, and the road that you've walked and that you've helped so many others on as well. May love continue to bless you in that work, and may I just pray that that treasure in your own heart and soul as well. So yeah, that's my wish for you.
Thank you so much, Colm. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for listening. And we'll figure out a way. We'll figure out a way for people to comment and ask questions and whatnot. But I really appreciate your time, Colm. Let's appreciate all the listeners. And I now close the Spiritual Forum.